Oh, okay. Oh, you look great.
Come in.
Let's go ahead and get started with the Community Development Committee. First up, we have a public presentation for the Sunflower Group. Laura?
Yes. And I would just invite Mr. Jason Swartz with the Sunflower Development Group to speak to you all this evening. Also with him this evening is Kurt Peterson, Polsonelli Law Firm. So I'll kind of...
You want to sit at the table or something?
You can go to the podium, that'd be great. And you want to sit at the table, you're welcome
I'll
to do
sit
that.
over there.
Okay. Sure.
Hello, my name is Jason Swords. I own Sunflower Development Group. We are a development company out of Kansas City, Missouri. Thank you very much for having us tonight. We currently have a piece of property under contract at 5665 Foxridge. We have been modeling a multi-family development, which would include some structured parking and so on and so forth. We are not 100% ready to present that plan and our request to you today. Our company, a little bit of background, we've done 18 historic buildings in Kansas City, Missouri. We participated in about $120 million in development in the last 8 years. And that is from anywhere from St. Louis to Wichita to Kansas City. We have been eyeing the city of Mission for a long time. I'm a Shawnee Mission grad, and my first house was not too far down the street from here, and we love the area. We're just trying to put together the right package and the right development that works. I believe that if I were to present something to you today, it would not be correct. We're still massaging numbers and dealing with construction costs and so on and so forth. So that's kind of the gist of it this evening.
Well, remind me, what zoning is that property?
J.C. Pinnacle Center.
What's the zoning on it though?
Oh, zoning is on.
Well, it's in the form-based code area,
Yeah.
so it's not really subject to zoning, it's subject to its design standards.
It's kind of industrial commercial.
It's 56 and Foxridge, is that?
Yes, sir. 5665 Foxridge. I'm sorry, my voice is
That's all right.
going and going.
The former JCPenney call center building.
Okay,
so,
okay.
Yes.
Very good. Terrific.
All right, any other questions?
What's our next step?
Yeah.
well,
I really...
Yes, they're going to have to kind of keep, they've got their work in progress still, and we were, just had a conversation yesterday and today about kind of looking at options and considering. Originally, when we first met with them, they were talking about a multifamily project. And I think that is still your first preference.
Yes, it is. We have other options that we might pursue, but I really need to come back to you with a plan that works, and we don't have that plan yet today. And I don't want to present anything that's not going to...
But you currently own the property, is that
No,
correct?
ma'am.
It's under contract.
Okay.
That was my question.
Yes. So they do not own it. This is the property where we had the Dial development project for the senior living project. Their project would not be, if it is in fact multifamily, would not be senior, would be market rate apartments.
Well, thank you for coming.
Yeah, when do you think you might be coming back to us? A couple of months? No idea.
I would hope within the next 60 days.
Okay.
But we want to bring something that works.
Sure.
And we need to find the right mix, whatever the right development for that piece of ground is.
Absolutely.
So,
Laura, would they be going through the planning commission next, or will they be coming?
No, we'll come back here again with kind of more detail.
but then we would go through.
And then you would go through the planning commission,
we would go
through the planning
we would go
commission
through the whole
process.
All right, thank you.
Well, I hope you get it all together and bring back a really great project that you're going to love and we're going to love.
Well, we like Mission, and we hope to be a part of it sometime soon. And I apologize that I don't have any more detail or voice.
What is the footprint of that? What's the size?
It's 6.2 acres.
6.2?
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks,
Motocross track. Yeah.
Thanks, sir.
The the next item we have is the road repairs to Sylvester Powell.
Yes,
Christy.
council members, thank you so much. Back in 2016, the end of 2016, we had George Butler Associates complete an assessment of the roofing system there at the Sylvester Powell Community Center. If any of you have been there after a rain event, you notice our decorative orange 5-gallon buckets that we sit in various locations throughout the facility. They're really quite attractive. But anyway, the intent of the assessment was to identify issues with the existing roofing system and to recommend a plan for repairs and probably eventual replacement within, say, like the next 10 years or so. GBA provided a roof assessment report that identified the repairs anticipated over the next 10 years and provided an estimate design and construction costs for the same. Those were used so that we can do budgeting priorities with those. The report did prioritize the repairs at what would be immediate or 0 years, 3 years, 5 years, and 10-year marks for the capital budget purpose. Currently, I am recommending that we complete the repairs that were identified through the immediate to 2-year time period. And those include the repairs to the chem curb pitch pans and the screen wall. And I'm pretending like I know what that means. A repair to the tie-in between the modified and the built-up roof. The reflash of roof drains in areas of tie-in repairs. Then to locate and repair the vertical parapet.
Good job.
Parapet wall seams that have been separated. Fill or repair the deficient pitch pans and repair damaged curb flashings. So in addition to that, GBA also recommended that we do a biannual inspection of the roof and see if there's any other ongoing issues that maybe need to be immediately addressed. So we did send out GBA what we call pre-qualified 5 roofing companies. When I use the term pre-qualified, that is because of some of the work that it needs to be done, which is the tie-in between the modified and the build-up roof. We need architectural, engineer signed, sealed, stamped drawings, and so those were companies that had the staff on board that could provide those. They weren't going to have to go out and find anyone else to do it. So we did submit those, or asked for those 5 quotes back. 4 people did respond to that. I had GBA review those recommendations or those proposals that came back, and with their recommendation, I do recommend that we approve the bid from Premier Contracting, Inc. in the amount of $10,810 for roof repairs, $1,100 for the sealing of all roofing nails used for tarp securement, which is when we were having some of the leaks. Then Brian went up there and he secured one of those nice handy-dandy little blue tarps to it. And they were the only company that recognized that that probably needed to be done and supplied us with a bid for that. If we were to go back to any of the other companies and say, hey, we'd like for you to add this to your bid, then that probably would drive the price for all of those up anyway. So anyway, and then as far as the roof inspection goes, I am recommending that we approve one of those to be performed in the fall of this year, and then on an ongoing basis, and that'll come from the general fund budget.
Did any of the firms recommend a full roof replacement?
Not at this point. We specifically were just looking at the recommendations that were made for 0 to 3 years.
What's the last time we had something comparable to a full roof replacement on that?
When the building was built.
Mm-hmm.
When the building was built.
Go ahead. I was going to make a ridiculous statement.
Me too.
Fix it.
No, I was going to say, is that...
They always take me so seriously.
Would that be cheaper than just getting bigger buckets?
It's close. It's close.
My question was whether you had them rescue the goose eggs you were up there shooting.
It is funny that you bring that up, because as I was walking out the back door tonight, the geese were flying over. I was like, they're back.
They're hanging out over here.
Good. Yeah, I noticed the
They're walking around out
evidence.
here.
Be careful coming in the sidewalks over here in the dark.
Sounds like it'll take care of the problem for a while.
Yeah, definitely needs to be done, and it is not a joke when I say we do
Right.
strategically place the orange buckets throughout the
No,
building.
It was nice to be able to see the pictures of it.
Good.
I never saw from that angle.
When would they start?
As soon as possible, of course, after it passes through the city council meeting, I would, get them on, and going into the rainy season, we would want to get them going as quickly as possible.
Have we used Premier on any other facet of the community center?
No.
Christy, when we do decide to replace the roof, will we need to consider some of the internal equipment that's inside? Because I remember when I did my tour, there's the furnace and all those things, not necessarily the furnace, but different equipment that's normally on the roof that's actually in the facility. Is that something we'll have to look at as
Absolutely.
timing-wise?
I think, as we start to look at the replacement of the chiller system, the cooling tower, the cool packs, some of the air handling units, all of those things, we need to take a very comprehensive look at the entire facility, see if it's structurally sound to support those things on the roof, if we need to make other adjustments to it, and what is going to be the most cost-effective way for us to move forward with those.
And is there a plan for that assessment at this time, or that comprehensive?
Not formal. Excuse me, Laura and I do talk about it on a regular basis. We know it's going to come up sooner rather than later, and we know that we need to be preparing for it.
Say take it to council.
Consent?
I think so. I'm fine with that. Yeah, I guess so.
All right, we'll take it to council and consent. All right, thank you, Christy.
Great, thank you.
All right, next up is the acceptance of permanent easements. Mr. Gilbert.
It's gonna be the John show here for a minute. Last summer when we did the Foxridge project, down at the Hillsborough Apartments, if you guys are familiar with their entrance right across from AT&T, the plans had originally showed a curb inlet to go out in the street. On the plans and when the utilities were marked, that inlet would have landed between a 6-inch gas line and an 8-inch water line. After we got everything excavated and staked, we found that it was actually in conflict with those lines. So what we did is adjusted that inlet and brought it around the corner into the Hillsborough apartment entrance. After talking with Joy at Hillsborough, she said that that would be fine. And she also said that there was some water that always came down that hill and froze across the driveway. So in order to catch that water, what we ended up doing is leaving the back side of that inlet open so it would capture that water before it hit the driveway and ran across. But what happened when we adjusted all that, we meandered off of right-of-way and onto private property. So in order to construct those improvements, we used a right of entry to gain access, and the tower property signed. And we told them at the time that we're gonna come in, do these improvements, and at a later date we're gonna come back and we'll get the easement documents all wrote up and go over that with you so that we can establish a stormwater easement where that infrastructure is at. So we came back here in the last month or so, got with the folks at Tower Properties, and got the easement for that infrastructure that we built there in the driveway.
That's not even to qualify for a benefit district, is it?
No. So this was an important thing for me to do because over the past few years we've found ourselves in the position of, hey, we've got this pipe, well, is it ours, is it not? It's on private property, where's the easement at? So I joke when I say this, but for my predecessors, I don't want to put them in the same position that we found ourselves in. So that was important to be sure that this got established, to just clarify for everybody down the road and in the future whose maintenance responsibility the pipe was.
Excellent. Any other questions?
I would recommend you take that to council.
Consent?
Thanks, John. Good job.
Thank you so much, John.
Sure.
All right, the next option we have is John, or action item, pardon me, and the chip seal with Overland Park.
In our annual street maintenance program, seals, a part of that is all of you know. sometimes we run ourselves into a situation where we have a boundary street, such as Lamar from 63rd, which is Shawnee Mission Parkway, to 67th Street. We share that with Overland Park. So essentially the southbound lane belongs to Overland Park, the northbound lane belongs to us, and the center line is kind of the dividing line between the two cities. Overland Park approached us and said, hey, it's come up in our chip seal plan to chip seal this section of Lamar. When we looked at our plan, the way that it was laid out, it showed Lamar getting chip sealed in that section in our program in 2019. When these situations arise, we try to work with that neighboring city to accommodate one way or the other how that works so we can line those things up. I don't think we'd want to chip seal half of the street at a time.
Right.
A similar situation came up a few years ago on 67th Street, where we actually had 67th Street in our chip seal program, called Overland Park, said, hey, this has come up in our program, where's it at in yours? Hey, it's in ours too. So we worked with Overland Park to draft an interlocal where they would pay 50%, we paid 50%. They administered the project. They have a lot of resources over there to be able to do that. And we also took advantage of their pricing. Typically, they split their seal program into two programs. They call it the north side and the south side. Each program's right around $1 million, whereas ours is typically right around $100,000 a year. So just that economies of scale, you end up with typically you end up with a better price. So that is the interlocal with Overland Park.
Questions?
Yeah, makes sense.
I like the economies of scale.
When's it scheduled?
It'll be this summer. It's still going to go out to bid, and just to clarify that, they send these interlocals just so we've got something drafted up. So when they get the bids and they hit the ground running, because with their chip seal program, it's usually so large, they have to start it early and they work all the way through the summer.
I do have one question. Since you're bumping that up from what you thought was going to be 2019 to 2018, that's not going to affect the streets we were going to be chip sealing in 2018.
No.
So
No, a lot of
that
times.
change anything except move it up here.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Taking council consent?
Yeah, I think so.
Is that your recommendation?
Sure.
Then I'm on with it.
All right, thank you, John. Oh, and then the KLM mowing contract, John, again.
Yes. Back in 2014, we sent out an RFP for mowing services. Since 2010, we've contracted our mowing. At that time, we did a cost-benefit analysis to see if we would end up saving money by contracting that service out instead of trying to do that in-house. At the time, all the numbers showed that we would save quite a bit of money in contracting that service out. The other thing that does is it frees up a lot of our time to be able to do different things. So typically we were spending about 2,500 hours a year back then mowing. So we've reallocated those hours to street maintenance or stormwater maintenance or facilities or parks to try to spread that out, kind of focus on more of the public works functions. This contract currently, like I said, was established in 2014. It had a one-year term with an option to renew through 2018. So this would be the final year of that contract. We are recommending that we do renew the contract with Kansas Land Management to do our mowing services. We added 2 parcels to that list that they had. Back in 2010, we started with approximately 39 acres, and now we're up to about 62. The 2 parcels that got added were Legacy Park at Markway and Broadmoor, and also the former Neff property at 7080 Markway. So they will take care of that and mow that. So we would recommend that we approve the contract with Kansas Land Management to do our 2018 mow.
I do have a question on that one.
Yes, sir.
Do those guys, are they, like in our park specifically, Waterworks Park, are they supposed to be doing the trimming in there, or do they only mow, or?
They mow and trim.
Okay, because at our Ward 1 meeting the other night,
Yes.
have you already talked to her about it?
Laura told me.
I passed it on to Laura, yeah.
Sometimes what ends up happening is, and we especially had this problem in Mohawk Park before the trail was redone. Those trails are kind of low,
Right.
sitting in the ground, so the grass will start creeping.
Yeah.
So typically in the spring, you have to go in there and basically edge that trail.
Right.
We've done that in-house in the past, because typically it's one time a year. You run through, edge everything, and you're good for the rest of the year. Brent and I visited Waterworks Park the other day. The creek wasn't too bad, but there are definitely some spots that you get trimmed back. But that's not something that they do. When they trim, they're
Right,
trimming
but
all
you guys
the
could take
things.
care of that.
Yeah.
And is that something you guys could do pretty quick so that Hillary could put it in her email that she's gonna send out to people who attended our meeting and let them know that that was addressed?
I will get with Brent and see how everybody's got their stuff all scheduled. I know that there's that section of trail that it's silted in.
Yeah.
They did go up and take care of that.
Oh, did
They
we
did.
have to bring dirt in for that?
The problem with that area is that there's a big area right there that's a sump. So that there's a lot of that ground that would have to come up.
Water all the time.
When we looked at it the other day, if you raise the trail in that spot, it's going to push that low spot somewhere else, and it's going to make it hold water further down the trail. So that would probably have to be something that we address when we reconstruct that trail. And talking to Brent, he said, you know, it's happened a couple times since he's been here, and he goes, you know, we'll keep an eye on it, make sure it just stays cleaned off.
Okay. I'm sorry, that's
no
kind of
problem.
off subject, so
No.
drag it over there.
Any other questions?
Take it. Take it.
Concerns?
Take it.
Thank you.
Calm down. I know that you're kicked out of your house temporarily. All right, thank you, John. That's it for the action items. We have a discussion items for the CARS program update.
I'm staying. I'm staying. Just to run through and give you guys a brief overview of the CARS program. CARS is a Johnson County Public Works program that they established back in the 90s. What it does is it takes proceeds from the state gas tax and puts it in a fund. Those funds are then allocated through the county to Johnson County cities for street projects. These projects, with the funding through the county, is up to 50% of the project, the construction and the inspection costs, with the city having to match the other 50%. The CARS eligible routes that we have in town are Lamar, 51st Street between Lamar and the East City limits, Foxridge, Johnson Drive, Rowe, Knoll, Martway, Roland Drive, and most recently Broadmoor between Johnson Drive and Martway. Last year we talked to the county, worked with them to get this designated a CARS route. The criteria for that was that street would have to connect two existing CARS routes, Johnson Drive and Martway, which it does, and also meet the average daily traffic criteria of 7,000 cars per day, which it meets rather easily. So similar to our CIP, the county has a 5-year CIP that we fill out a CARS Form A, we bring it to you all, you know, tell you these are the projects that we plan on submitting, and submit that to the county. So we submit it to the county, 5-year program. That does not commit us to any funds, so it's kind of on a year-to-year basis. You can tweak that. So here in the next month or two, we'll be presenting a 2019 to 2023 CARS program to you all. So look for that coming. The projects that we kind of have in queue, the first one that we have planned for 2019 is that Broadmoor section from Johnson Drive to Martway. Those improvements would consist of full-depth reconstruction, new curb, stormwater, ADA improvements, new pavement, street signs, the installation of a new traffic signal at Johnson Drive and Broadmoor, which is desperately, desperately needed.
Debbie!
Yes.
You
Yeah.
just painted.
Yeah, so it's
So that's that project in a nutshell. I'll touch on that a little bit more later, and Emily, I'll probably have you put the plan up there. And then, and for now, right now, we have Foxridge Phase 2 for 2020, which would consist of the rest of Foxridge. It meet at 51st Street where we stopped this year, take it on down around the corner into Lamar. That's a pretty big project. It'll be similar to what we did on this previous portion of Foxridge, narrow the road up, get some pedestrian improvements through there, full depth reconstruction, stormwater, the whole nine. That section has a bad water problem along that hill. The falls, there's a lot of water coming out of that hill that ends up out in the street. A lot of times it'll freeze and then freezes across the street. And we're down there trying to chisel the ice out of there to keep everybody from sliding around. Like I said, it's a big cost. The estimated project cost for that right now is $5.5 million. It's a long stretch. There's a lot of things that need to happen through there. But like I said, right now it's scheduled for 2020, and we're hoping to make sure that we push it through then. The other one that's in queue at the moment is the next phase of Johnson Drive, which includes Metcalf to Lamar. This project includes full-depth street rehabilitation, the continuance of that stormwater interceptor from Lamar on up to Metcalf, new stormwater, curb, gutter, sidewalks, pavement marking, street signs, ramps, street lights. And the total estimated project cost for that project is currently $10.8 million. Now, that project, yeah, so basically our operating budget for a year. That project qualifies for other funding sources also, in addition to cars. That project actually qualifies for STP funds, which are Surface Transportation Program funds. Those are federal funds that are administrated through Mid-America Regional Council. We have used those funds before, both on Martway and the previous portion of Johnson Drive. Those funds are an 80-20 match, so 80% STP funds, 20% city. The other funds that would be available for that project are SMAC funds because of the interceptor. Currently, SMAC funds those projects at a 75-25 match, so 75% SMAC, 25% city. We originally had this in our 2022 program year. Due to the pre-planning that this project's going to take, along with the application that you have to make to STP for those funds, we've pushed it a year. Right now they are programming for 2021 and 2022 projects. They plan for those way ahead of time. So at this point, we didn't really feel like we had everything that we needed to really make a good submission. And I think that project's going to take quite a bit of planning, just like the last phase did. I remember when I came here in 2010, we were already talking about Johnson Drive, and that project wasn't going to happen until 2014. So there's a lot of pre-construction planning and work that needs to happen on that. And I just feel like by pushing it a year, I think it would be a lot more reasonable for us to do that and give it the attention that it needs and the pre-planning it needs to really make a good submission.
And unlike the CARS program or the SMAC program, where you have a greater degree of flexibility in terms of then when your year gets there, making that decision about whether to accept those grant funds. On the STP funds, you essentially have to commit, and then if you turn them back, sort of frowned upon. And we've been in that situation once in the last several years, and so we were very cautious about wanting to get an application in that we may or may not be ready to accept the funds for, and we feel like we'll be better positioned. The application for a 2023 project will still be due in February or March of 2019, so we only have about another year to get through some of that. The other thing is, without a final decision on the resolution of the transportation utility fee case, we're a little bit in a holding pattern on some of these larger projects and understanding how we might come up with our share.
Hey, I'm just curious, how does that work when you got two sources there for funding? One of them 75%, one of them 80%. Hey, you're making money on that deal. Do you just have to pick one or the other, or?
Well, the interceptor would be SMAC.
The interceptor would be the SMAC portion.
Which is county.
Yeah.
It's kind of a convoluted formula where you try to figure that out, because you got to make sure that not only do you try to maximize those higher percentage funds, you got to make sure that you're matching everything that you're applying for. So essentially, if you're using STP funds, you need to make sure that you got the 20% to match that. If you're using STP, so that's where it's kind of a mathematical equation, trying to figure out how to leverage that. And then also in the past, at STP, there is an 80-20 match, but depending on the number of projects, what Kansas has done in the past is everybody's kind of said, okay, we've got this number of projects, we've got this level of funding, you know, for everybody to get an equal shake on their projects, we're going to take a little bit of a haircut on the money we receive. So in the past, it's typically been about 80% of 80%. So
That's 64.
It is. So
You did it by yourself?
No.
But it varies too. It's like your SMAC program projects. They run on a point system. And, you know, if there's 20 projects, they only have enough funding to do 5, that's all they're going to do. So it's kind of a give and take, and try to come up with a reasonable amount to request, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I mean, just from looking at it and splitting it up, I mean, it looks like we're potentially taking a $10.5 million project and only having to spend maybe $2.5–3 million ourselves to do it. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think once you finally really get down to what you end up with, for instance, it's like this Johnson Drive project out here. It was a $7.8 million project, construction-wise, and we had CARS funds and we had STP funds.
I think we were in for almost
2.1,
5.
2.5, so
You have to do the planning costs.
we have.
Right, the other thing, the engineering costs are 100% ours. So, and these numbers include the engineering and design costs.
So essentially, all in, that Johnson Drive project was right around $10 million. We leveraged close to $4.5 million of those.
Okay.
So
If the Broadmoor section here, would that's something the CARS has to still approve, right?
it is an approved CARS route.
I mean, is it a project that's been approved by CARS? Or are you basically asking for that to be approved?
It will be approved. We'll send our CIP for 2019 projects. Typically with CARS, they approve every city's first priority project.
Okay.
So, you know, Overland Park will submit 4 projects. Well, depending on how much money's in that pot, you typically always get your first priority project. The good thing for us is we usually only have 1 CARS project every year, so it's guaranteed funding.
So would you do that project in conjunction with the Johnson project, or would it be done separately?
It'll be separate. that Broadmoor piece would be 2019.
Okay.
And then the next phase of Johnson Drive, would currently right now where we have it plugged in the CIP, would be 2023.
Are these three projects, you know, they total about $17 million. Is that a typical ask for a city our size? Is that comparable to what we've done in the past with them?
You know, we, in the past 8 years that I've been here, we've leveraged a lot of outside funding. So if you look back when I got here, so Row from Shawnee Mission Parkway to 67th Street, that was a Tiger grant. I think it also had cars on it too. Knoll from Martway to 67th Street was another cars project. Martway had cars funds, Johnson Drive had cars funds. Those two sections of Martway and Johnson Drive also had STP funds. So we've leveraged a lot of outside funding. Last year's Foxridge project was a cars funded project. So for a city our size, I'd say that we've leveraged a lot of outside funding. I'd say probably higher than most.
Is SMAC administered by Mark as well, or?
SMAC's administered by the county.
Okay.
That's a county administered program.
So let's talk about kind of next steps on Broadmoor.
So Broadmoor, a little background on Broadmoor. Back in 2011, we went through the design process with Olson, the preliminary design of this project between Martway and Johnson Drive. At the time, this was not designated a cars route, so this project would have been a fully funded by the city project. At that time, we presented a plan to the property owners in this corridor. The plan that you see up there is a bit of a departure from what's up there now. A lot of on-street parking to meet with the West Form-Based Code. And in areas, you know, making sure that you have clear driveway entrances to some of the areas that have parking lots. At the time, the Martway project hadn't been done. Tiger project was kind of still in its infancy. The old Herff Jones building was still where the development with the Wellstone and Chick-fil-A and Culver's and all that stuff was. So there wasn't a whole lot happening over there. Cornerstone Commons was still the car dealership. So it looked a whole lot different over there back in 2011. But at the time, there wasn't a lot of buy-in from the property owners. I think the on-street parking for some of them was a little bit bothersome. But I think they also, you know, said, hey, you know, we don't see people walking through here. We don't, you know, our folks are typically drive-in customers. But I think with everything that's happened through there, it's changed quite a bit. Just looking out into the future, this corridor is going to be vital to connect Johnson Drive with Martway. And I think our biggest sell to Mark and the STP is going to be, hey, you know, they're focused on multimodal transportation. So bikes, buses, pedestrians, cars. So they want to take the whole package and see in your application that you're addressing those concerns. In talking to Olson preliminarily with this Johnson Drive project, I think what we want to do is not only improve the pedestrian movement on Johnson Drive, but be able to have a connection between Johnson Drive and Martway to get folks down to the bicycle lanes on Martway and get folks down to the bus stops on Martway. Instead of trying to run those same amenities parallel, basically a block away, be able to connect the two as you come out of Overland Park and get down Broadmoor to get to some of the things that are already on Martway. In order to do that, we have to be able to establish sidewalks and get that connectivity going between those two corridors. which with on-street parking, as you see it there, would help to get that sidewalk in a spot where people aren't, you're not trying to build the sidewalk out next to the street and have the parking on the other side of the sidewalk. You've got the sidewalk behind the parking, so you get your pedestrians away from the cars, and you're not trying to mix the two as they cross paths through that whole corridor. This is basically the project that we showed them in 2011. We met with the CIP committee to discuss this and get their thoughts on, hey, you know, is there something here that you guys are seeing that we're not, or is there something that doesn't make sense? I think collectively at that meeting, we all, you know, came out on the same page of, yeah, we think this is a good place to start. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys may have or anything that you may notice. Ken?
How have the businesses been, have they participated in that at all?
Not yet. What we've done is we've taken it to the CIP committee. We wanted to be sure that we had a discussion with you all tonight. We're going to try to get all of our stuff together here and in April, early April, engage them, have an open house, have them come in, talk, open that conversation up to say, hey, you know, we're back, we want to do this, and let's all get on the same page and see what we can do about making something happen.
I think that's good. The corner up here at Johnson and Broadmoor, that corner, that's a really crazy
It is.
corner, and parking is really weird. What's going on?
Yeah.
I
Yes,
noticed
it
that
is.
too, Ken, and I, the only thing I noticed is just that the red, you know, stops right there, you know, where Southwest Jewelers and now the tattoo shop is
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
west side there, and you know, as a Planet Sub fan, you know, it's a very interesting entrance, and I know that it'd be going down on Johnson Drive and stretching outside what the project necessarily is about, but I feel like maybe including something with that would make some sense since we're already there.
We had a scoping meeting today with Olson to discuss some of this stuff. And some things that we talked about today that you're not really seeing here was just that, is, okay, and Paul brought this up. He said, you know, hey, I know that the way that we have this, there's this weird parking here that's kind of on street, but not really, and then, you know, the way the current configuration is hey, we'll just drive around this corner, now we got people running head on into each other. It's just like a weird, like no man's land kind of space up in here. So he said, you know, if it's something that you guys want to think about, extend this on around and truly make that on-street parking, because essentially that's what you have right now.
That's right.
What were the reasons last time around for the resistance to the on-street parking?
A few things. Down at the mattress, the discount furniture, right now he's got, I'm going to say 5.5 parking spaces in here. His biggest concern was, okay, you're going to take me down from 5 or 6 to 4. And they're going to be parked out on the street, and they're not going to be able to navigate around their car to load anything in or out of it. And he was also concerned with the control of the parking spaces. So right now, he basically says what happens with his parking spaces. In this scenario, they become basically public parking spaces.
Does he have anything behind his building?
He doesn't.
Okay.
We talked at the CIP committee. There have been some folks on that committee that said, hey, you know, typically when I buy things from there, they take me around the back and load me up in the back. Again, it's kind of that weird space because this alleyway that runs back here actually belongs to Pride Cleaner. So, you know, it's trying to clean that up and, you know, make sure that everybody's...
Would Pride Cleaner still have like their circle drive there, or would that,
Yes.
that go away? Or would it
So
stay?
the way that this is set up, there's no real way to put on-street parking in front of Pride Cleaners the way that that place operates.
Okay.
So what it would essentially have is basically what they have now. They have a drive entrance coming in here, you drive through, and a drive entrance coming back out. The other place where we kind of got in trouble was the veterinarian. Right now, the way that that's set up, their folks come in and park, and then other folks park behind them. So it's kind of a double park scenario. And the way that this frontage is it's all just an open sea of pavement to be able to just drive right in. So that was kind of their concern, is where's everybody going to park at? When you kind of take away this double park thing and put 5 spots out here. Again, we kind of discussed at the CIP meeting, a lot of things have changed since then. And, you know, I don't know until we kind of have that open house and that dialogue of, hey, what can we do to curb that concern? I mean, would they be available to use some of these spots that are in the Cornerstone lot? Or what other options do we have to get people parked in a fashion that makes sense?
Unleashed, there's frequently the same double parking as what you're describing at the vet as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have it at Mission Pet Mart. I mean, one of the things that has happened is we have, at the time in 2011 when we went through this process, Pride Cleaner was essentially just that front office. So they weren't doing actually any dry cleaning or processing at that facility. And since then, they've added probably $1 million+ worth of equipment, and they actually have employees on site processing. So if you're ever in Panera, you may notice that there are often 20 or so cars parked behind back there. So we know that over time, and as things have changed in the last several years in that area, that there have been some shifts in parking needs and demands. And so that's one of the things that's really going to be central to the conversation with the business owners about what are those, and what opportunities do we have to address those, so that you have adequate parking for both your customers and your employees.
The employee, that's a big one.
Yeah, the employee parking.
Mission Animal Clinic has 3 veterinarians. One's not there right now, but he's still there. And they have 5 employees. I mean, that's beyond the parking spaces they have.
Right.
With Unleashed, is that, so I see the on-street parking right in front of it, and then is there an additional parking lot that's in front? Do you see what I'm saying? Like those cars that are right there?
There would be a drive entrance right there to the
So you'd have,
south.
and it kind of gets convoluted trying to lay it on top of this area.
Right.
But you'd have your on-street parking would be here. Your sidewalk would run right through here. And then this would be a grassy area. And then they'd have a drive here because I think they have an overhead door right here. So we wanted to keep them access to that overhead door coming in and out. You know, we've been working with them some to address some issues with water running through here. And I think that grass area would help solve that problem. So trying to
It's quite the challenge.
It
So
is.
understand that the first reaction when we put this out is likely to be, but that's the point of having this dialogue, is that, you know, we need to make sure we understand.
Can we tell if all those buildings have rear access for people, like employees to get in the back if they had to?
So if you kind of look through here, Mission Pet Mart, they have this alleyway right here.
Right.
And then there's a retaining wall, and then Panera's parking lot.
Right.
So there is access on this side of the building. There's access behind the furniture store. How he gets here would be, I assume, through here, through Pride Cleaner's property and to his back. They're open in the back. They've got all their dog kennels kind of around the building. I know there's access to the back of Planet Sub because I like Planet Sub too. So, you know, that's kind of that side. On the other side, the biggest impact would really be to the vet. The other ones kind of don't really have those kinds of problems. Johnny's Barbecue basically stays the way it is. The dentist office has their drive and their parking lot. You'd add on-street parking out here. K&H, we wanted to make sure that he had a drive here and then a drive to his overhead door here. So he stays relatively the same as he was. And of course, Popeyes, you have your driveway and nothing really changes there.
At the vet, is he still gonna be able to pull in there and park by the building like they are there?
So,
Or is that all blocked off now?
you'd have on-street parking here.
Right,
You'd have your sidewalk coming through here,
right.
sidewalk up to the door. This would be grass.
Yeah, so he's not
That's all
gonna be
that
able to pull in
parking's
there.
on.
That's what I was saying, that's all gone.
So that's different.
Okay.
And he is the one that's probably impacted the most on this side of the street.
Yeah.
Now, he would still have this road through here. They can park behind. A lot of times they park along the side of the building.
I park.
Okay. And then, like I said, it came up, hey, are any of these stalls, available for folks, maybe the employees can utilize some of this. You can talk to these folks and make sure that that's okay with them. That way you kind of take some of the ones, get them around the back, and the rest is left for the customers.
Yeah.
But that probably is the most challenging one.
I often drive that strip down from Broadmoor down to Natural Grocers, cut through that right by the vet, that one.
Mm-hmm.
And there would maybe be some room for parking. Maybe we could put in some, just parallel parking lines or something there.
There's some striping along that side of the building to
Yeah.
make sure that people can kind of delineate that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's not going to be easy.
And you're looking to have an open house then in April perhaps?
Yep.
Okay. I think that would
Because
be
we'd
great.
like to get that dialogue started, to make sure that we're ready. To be able to do this, we will have to acquire right-of-way / easement / construction easement. So
Yeah.
we want to make sure that everybody's on board. I know I've had a couple of them approach me and say, "Oh, this street's awful."
It is.
It is,
It really is.
And the traffic is increasing. I think because
It
a lot
is.
of people are cutting over from Johnson over to Markway there.
Yeah.
Well, you got businesses over there now.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was kind of surreal to go back and look at the old aerial
Yeah, I
that
bet
the
it
plans were
was.
on, because you can zoom that out just a little bit.
Whoops.
We're looking at it from the moon.
None of that was here.
Right.
It was all gone, and it was just a big pavement area with grass.
Yeah.
None of the Tiger stuff was done, so you didn't have the bus stops, you didn't have this on-street parking. Panera didn't have their drive-through yet.
That drive-through is a problem.
That was
We're
still
working on that.
That was still a four-way stop. So a lot of it really didn't hit me either till I looked back at that old plant center. Man, it's a whole lot different in there.
Are there traffic implications to having that on-street parking as well? When I know on Johnson, when you have the slanty parking, sometimes it's hard to see or things like that.
Different problem on Johnson Drive, I think, because you're not looking at a 4-lane configuration.
Yeah, it's only 3.
Yeah, I think that having right now we've got it
Almost the same, probably.
3-lane.
Yeah.
So
Maybe
you
that would
have the 2 through lanes, and then you have that center turn lane. Hopefully that would help with that some.
But that will be something that we'll have to consider as we go through this process. We've had that conversation internally about just looking at, particularly I think at closer to the corner.
If you start queuing traffic through here, are people going to be nice enough to be, small
People
towns?
out.
Hey, come on back, or so.
And that's something the engineers would talk about with updated plans or
They would-
in-house or.
Yep.
And that's the same scenario that you have like at Mr. Goodson's at Lamar.
Oh, yeah.
Now, you
It's
back
the
out.
same problem.
Yeah.
We're not, like firewall. If that signal stops people and they start
Yeah.
queuing up, you still got people that need to back out. So
If they didn't put a sidewalk on the east side, would that allow for additional parking? So I'm just thinking, okay, I mean, sidewalks are great, and I think you're looking at walkability, and I think that's important. By the same token, I'm really worried that we have enough parking.
Yeah.
You don't really, not too many people walk to the vet with their dog. I mean, I can, I move close, but.
Yeah, and like I said, the way that that scenario is now is a little strange, having to double park, and, you know, that entrance doesn't meet codes.
There's some businesses that are ill-positioned. To say the least.
You know, that driveway approach is basically 60 feet wide. It's supposed to be 35. It's just trying to find a balance of being able to try to clean it up and still appease the folks that are still there.
Right.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying, and that's kind of the battle that we're kind of faced with. I hate to kind of buck the code and the requirements and to only to maybe have to come back and end up doing that later, should that ever change hands. So I think.
Right.
Well, and I think
if you go and change everything, then a year later he moves, he's going to a different location.
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah. I think, you know, we listen and we look at where we can make adjustments or how we can, you know, I think even thinking about things like parallel parking and striping the parallel parking so it's as efficient as it can be. You know, I think that gives us the opportunity, and if it makes sense to make some other adjustments, we can absolutely, you know, absolutely do that. But
down the road, that whole area is ripe for development.
It's definitely a unique setup as it is, so we're definitely going to have to think outside the box and probably come up with a whole lot of unique solutions to some unique problems.
Laura, what's our contract ending, Chad? In the building?
2028. 2028, yep.
What's
Choose
Chad?
that, yeah.
So Chad owns,
Mission Petmore?
right.
Not what's Chad.
Chad, yeah.
I guess if the previous displacement, is that what?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, and so the city actually issued bonds to assist in the acquisition and relocation and improvements to that building. The bonds will be paid off this year.
Okay.
But then he's in a land lease agreement, so the city actually owns the land underneath the building, and so he continues to make lease payments through 2028, even though our bonds are paid off this year. That's where I always get confused, because those two don't match up. And then at the end of the lease term, he has the option to purchase the land for $100,000 plus CPI. If he could do that at any point along the way as well. If he does not, then that land and the improvements actually revert back to the city. So it's a very unique, was a very unique sort of financing situation. If you ever hear somebody say something about fish bonds, that's what they're talking about. That's I think what Bruce Kimmel affectionately did.
All right, any other questions?
Anything we can do in the short term on those giant manhole craters on Johnson Drive?
You know, we went through and patched that area that was so broken up in that intersection. The problem that we have is the lid and the casting is actually sunk down in the lid, or in the ring, and those are AT&T proprietary rings, and they don't like us touching that stuff. So that would be something that they would have to contract with somebody to do, and to do that work, they would essentially have to close that intersection to tear that all out and redo those castings. Another thing that we did talk to the engineers about today is say, hey, while we're here, can we go ahead and take care of this, because it's kind of a mess. They did a study on this weird pork chop island highway deal, and what they propose is getting rid of this island, getting this curb out here more like a typical curb, still having this right turn lane, but kind of get away from this weirdness.
That'd be
It's
good.
very weird to cross as a pedestrian.
Yeah,
Right.
like hanging out with
Exactly.
Has that
But-
stoplight been replaced, John? Or is
It was
that in the
painted.
plans?
That was part of the.
That'll be part of this.
This traffic signal will get replaced with that project. Right now, the traffic signals and
But painted.
but painted.
And I did have a request at the Ward 3 meeting 2 different times about doing some kind of between Lamar and Broadmoor. There's no way for somebody to get across, you have to go all the way to the end, of doing a potential crosswalk, just identification of this is pedestrian friendly, please watch out for pedestrians at Riggs. And
Okay.
even though that's my street, but I didn't recommend it.
Sure.
No.
But Nick, to answer your question, like I said, I mean, to do that, we would have to get the utility on board.
Yeah.
Have we
to do
asked
those
for
Can we
that?
just get some fill on top of those or something?
I wish we could.
Okay,
And I even
There's
asked,
gonna be a bad accident there one of these
I mean,
days.
I even asked them if they had any different lids to use.
What did they say?
Who, AT&T?
And there's no way we can force AT&T to fix that. What the traffic has.
We can push and see if
That
they'd
would be
be willing
nice
to do
because
it.
they've got some deep
I
pockets.
go almost in the lane where people come in this
Well,
way.
everybody
everybody
does. That's what I'm
does.
saying, there's gonna be a bad accident there one of these days. So
Well, like I
we go a little
said,
too fast and
that-
swerve
when that-
around and.
Pavement got repaired with the mill and overlay program
Right.
last year. I reached out to them and said, hey, these manhole castings are awful. He goes, well, to fix it, we would essentially have to close that down for about
A month?
tear that out,
Never been at its worst.
redo the top of the,
Yep.
pull the castings out, redo the castings, let them cure, get them, you know.
Maybe we could put a
We can ask
roundabout in
again.
there.
But we'd be happy,
Oh, I agree.
Oh,
Shane, you got that done before Monday.
Just start
Yeah.
going and dumping some dirt on there or something.
I got-
Fill it with gravel.
That would be better than nothing.
Yeah.
bricks.
we'll reach out, sure.
Anything else?
No, good report, man.
All right, yeah, that was. Look forward to that meeting. All right, thanks, John, and department updates.
Yeah, just a couple of things quickly, and I'm going to pass around, these are some handouts that we got from Paul Welcome, the county appraiser, who was out on Monday to meet with us about his revaluation report, which has been all over the news. They had the Northeast Johnson County Chambers hosting 2 town hall meetings with Paul.
They're full.
I got in on the Monday one, is it?
You did?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say the next
They
one
have like
is,
sold out on their advertising.
Because they changed the location.
Yeah, so it was still full, I think.
Prairie Village one. changed
okay, so
location.
you can't get in, I didn't see.
I don't know about
must
the
have
next one, but
missed
the one
sold out.
tonight, they were
Okay,
advertising
well, the
like
next
sold
one
out.
is next Monday morning at 8 a.m. at the Roland Park Community Center, so I'll call and see if we can still get in. I will provide a link to the full kind of revaluation report, which is available on the appraiser's website and the city administrator's report this Friday if you're interested in that. But it will share countywide data. It has some city-specific data, but if you look at the sheet that says market value comparisons at the top, this is what they're estimating right now will be our assessed valuation, appraised valuation for 2018. So if you go to the bottom, you can see that our total appraised value is estimated to increase by 11.64%. That doesn't mean we're going to see an 11.64% increase in our budget. It means that we're going to have some really interesting calculations with respect to the property tax lid when we get to budget time. But if you kind of look up, the nice thing about this sheet and this data will not be in the full report, is it will show us kind of what's happening in each of the various real estate or real property classifications. So you can see that residential, which includes apartments, is really the driver for our increase, and we've been hearing that in the news for the last 2.5 weeks. So 16.10% was the increase, or the estimated increase there. Commercial and industrial is increasing, but only at about 4.75%. And then you see just kind of those other categories that exist. So they will go, the notices of value went out, they'll go through their appeal process. They've told us they expect the appeals this year could be as high as 10,000, which is about double, of what they had last year. So it'll be an interesting process this year. And so we'll talk about this in more detail as we go through the budget process, and we have a chance to digest some of this data more specifically.
Do you know more of what they look at when they're looking at appeals on appraisals? I mean, the driver for this had to do with houses under 350,000, and people were wanting them left and right. But so how do they take that information as a driver and insert it into a formula where people are petitioning? You know, I can never get this out of my head. How do they do that?
Well, they're going to look at comparable sales, so I think you see, they show you on your notice of value sort of comparable sales and those things. And so that is going to be a big driver, and that's going to be a difficult one to argue. So I think you go in and you start literally talking about the number of bathrooms and the number of bedrooms, and, you know, are you really matching up to those comparables in the same, you know, in the same fashion as
what do they talk about when it says real sales price versus adjusted sales price? I mean, I don't get that. You know, when you're looking at the comps.
So they're...
Because it seemed
they
to
will
be quite a bit higher on the adjusted sale price than it was the actual.
It's based on the features.
The features
There's
of your
a little
home.
paragraph on the sheet.
Okay.
It tells you, it's their idea of adjusting it to make it match the features of your house.
Okay. I guess I just never drilled
Yeah,
down.
because I was also really confused. And I decided to read the whole piece of paper.
So there's a lot of I think really good information in the full report and it breaks it down by the residential segment, commercial, hotel, motel, you know, a variety, multifamily, a variety of different things. So we'll share that again, like I said, on Friday. The other thing that he handed out, and this is new, is multifamily construction by city for the last 4 years. If you flip it over to the back page, you can look and see that the bottom number, various multifamily projects throughout the county in various stages, either proposed or completed, over that time period were estimated to add 17,386 multifamily units countywide. And they really started doing this because every city is asking the same question that we're asking, which is what is really continuing to drive this multifamily market? You know, as Paul said to us on Monday, from his vantage point, it's a couple of things. So the net sort of inflow in terms of population to the county is between 7,500 and 10,000 residents a year. If you look at the new housing starts, which are averaging about 2,000 a year, you've got to make up that difference in some other fashion, and that's been made up in large part by the multifamily construction.
On ours, what is Markwood?
That's the project
The proposed
here.
project that we discussed.
So we remanded back to
The other thing is you have people who've gone out to the suburbs are trying to come back in, and so that's creating higher demand as well.
Which is changing demographics too. We have empty nesters that want to downsize, you know, young people that aren't really ready to commit yet to a home.
Yeah.
So when you do look at that Martway project, they picked this up at its initial stage. So this is 156 units is not correct. I mean, the project that was remanded back had 117 units. So this is the one that was proposed at 5 stories. So they picked this up late last summer at some point. So it's not 100% accurate, but I think it paints kind of an interesting picture. I do apologize for the lack of report from Sunflower Development Group. I thought I was going to get a PowerPoint presentation this morning, and I did ask them to go ahead and comment. They asked if I should take them off the agenda this evening, and they are really interested and excited about doing a project edition, and so I felt like it was important for them to at least come and you could see the whites of their eyes. But I think we will see them back here probably closer to 30 days with the project.
So Countryside is still listed as a city.
We still get a tax distribution of 0 twice a year for the city of Countryside.
It's been 15 years.
I know. I kept thinking for a while it made sense because you might have delinquent taxes that that would be coming in. But you're right, 15 years later, I don't understand. And I never took the time, and it's not worth a call out there to say, why are you still on?
And then they changed their system too recently, but they still got Countryside in.
Interesting, so.
Maybe, I think after this year, maybe Paul will retire.
He might, absolutely. And that's all I have for department updates.
All right, very good. That concludes the CDC committee.
Need a quick break? You guys ready for it? All right, we'll go ahead and get started then. So we'll call over our Finance and Administration Committee for Wednesday, March 7th. First up on the agenda, Martha, we got an update on the Rotary street solicitation application.
Yes, Rotary approaches us every year and asks for permission to hold their Greater Kansas City Days sale of newspapers that coincides, I believe, with opening day of the Royals. The proceeds from that benefit their Rotary Youth Camp and some other local charities. And so they've submitted their application. The police department will be providing them with vests to wear. They're going to be at the usual locations that they have done for many, many years.
I'll recommend to take that.
Yeah.
Consent?
Yeah, consent.
That's good. All right. Next up on the list, we have ordinance amendments related to the duties and functions of the city treasurer.
Yes, thank you. Last month, we appointed Debbie Long as the city treasurer. That was following the retirement of Don Chamlin, who'd been our city treasurer for 25 years. As a part of that, we started looking at all the places in our code where we referenced the duties and responsibilities of the city treasurer, and we realized there were a lot of places where we talked about a city treasurer where for many, many years the city treasurer has not really actually been performing those functions. So we wanted to take the opportunity to just sort of go through and do some code cleanup, and you will see us come back to you over the course of this year in several areas of the code where we're trying to do some concentrated cleanup and kind of make us match our current day responsibilities and functions. So really, it just was primarily a cleanup of changing the word city treasurer to finance director in some instances, matching those kinds of things. The one thing that we did not change, well, the other thing that we recommended, and then I'll come back to this, the other thing that we recommended was removing the mayor as a signer on all the business licenses. We had done a survey of all of the other cities in Johnson County, and nobody does it. It's primarily the city clerk. Having the in-house city treasurer, it made sense for us to still leave the city treasurer's signature on that. So for now, we will leave the city clerk and the city treasurer as the signer there. The one thing that we looked at, because you may recall that our intention, we'd originally intended to appoint the city finance director as the city treasurer, but we were unable to do that because our current code has a Johnson County residency requirement. And so, as we started looking into that,
That's no joke. Got one more house in Jackson County.
but one, and so I think it made sense, and we got comfortable in looking at leaving it with the accounting manager's position. But one of the things that we really had to look at there was making sure we were creating or maintaining separation of duties between things that she might be doing as a city treasurer versus things that she would be doing in reconciliation processes as that. So longer term, if we think we're going to continue with leaving the city treasurer's appointment internal, which I think would certainly be our recommendation, and that's fairly consistent with many other cities in Johnson County. We may want to revisit the issue of removing that residency requirement for the city treasurer. But that was done via a charter ordinance, which means that we aren't able to do that as we clean up this set of ordinances. It would require us to pass and consider a new charter ordinance which then has a certain protest period that accompanies it and some different publication requirements. So it may be interested in, happy to answer any questions, but then answer any feedback or discussion around the residency issue.
Is that our last position with that requirement?
No, the municipal judge and pro tem judges and your city administrator have a Johnson County residency requirement.
Now, you said that we already have charter ordinances on which ones?
On all those.
On all of the others, they're chartered out from having to live in the...
No, the charter ordinance creates the residency requirement for the judges, the city treasurer, and the city administrator.
Okay, but that's not something that's required by state statute.
Correct.
That was my confusion.
Right, and that was, it's confusing because I didn't find it clear. There's a set of standards that applies to mayor council forms of government, and a different set of standards that applies to commission cities of the second class, depending on your actual form of government. So we would have that opportunity to remove that residency requirement, but we couldn't include that this evening.
Any other questions, recommendations?
I thought surely I'd get a comment on the eradication of rats.
Oh, yeah, that made me cringe when I read it.
I thought that was interesting, but I've got a neighbor that has a raccoon problem.
The December raccoons?
We're having a problem with
Where's
rats.
Wayne at?
Yeah, where is it? Where are we at? The parks?
I hear my neighbor every day saying that.
Attic.
Your neighbor's attic?
I saw a whole family come out of it.
Maybe
Oh,
I saw
family?
the water for you.
Yeah, it's a work every day. I saw a fox in my front yard the other day.
Urban living.
So you recommend that?
I recommend that, okay?
Consent?
Consent?
Yeah, well, sure,
Okay.
okay.
So did you all see, while we're speaking of raccoons in December, that we posted the note from Northeast Animal Control on our social media networks so that people use caution and make sure their pets' vaccines are correct?
The park encounter was kind of scary.
Yeah, it's really kind of awful. I was talking to someone else today about just zombie raccoons. It's one of the saddest things. So awful for them and awful for our pets and really hard. So.
All right, well, next up, we have an ordinance correcting membership to the Sustainability Commission.
Yes, this shouldn't take much of your time, but on the heels of Laura mentioning that we wanted to tackle some code cleanup issues, and in the spirit of accuracy, when we added the 2 student positions last year, I did not adjust the number of total members allowed on the commission. So the intent was the number that had been, which was 9, was maintained. We didn't mean to restrict any other membership. So maintain that membership and add the 2 students. So it's a total of 11. So a member from each ward, a non-resident member, one of whom may be a non-resident, and then the 2 student positions for a total of 11.
Emily, I was wondering on the reading of it, because currently both students are not residents, right?
Yeah.
So do we need to make an additional correction for that, or is that encompassed?
We didn't call that out in particular, so we just said youth members to allow for either as we saw fit. So,
Okay.
or as.
But doesn't it only specify that there can be 1 non-resident member? So do we also need to make a change to allow for more than 1 non-resident member, or?
Well, that would be a technical reading that we had not made. I mean, I think
Okay.
that it would, in one interpretation, it would be in addition to the non-resident member. I think the spirit is that there'd be 1 non-resident and then the 2 youth.
Who could be from
Who-
wherever?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. We didn't know at the time if the availability of students would be such that we would want to restrict it to just mission, and that in fact is not the case for the 2 students who approached us initially for sustainability. So.
Please pursue that amendment.
Consent also.
Consent?
Yeah.
Now we're gonna have.
Did we have
consent
anything?
agenda.
I don't think we had anything
Yeah,
go to
so
the regular
that's
agenda, right?
Unless they have something to bring up.
Are there any department updates, Laura?
Just quickly,
I've got another,
okay,
Department?
sorry.
no, but other comes before department
Yep.
of this, sorry.
So, other discussion items, I guess, Mr. Pat Quinn?
I do have one, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
This came to me from former Mayor Steve Schillinger. They're having a fundraising gala here for the Mission Project. I think you guys are all familiar with the Mission Project. And all the great things that they do, not just for the residents that live there, but also for the city of Mission. They help us out quite a bit. I think I'll find out that. Did you want one?
I'll share.
But anyway, they're having this gala coming up, and Steve, of course, has been named the chairman, I think, of the event this year. It might be an honorary chairman, but, so he doesn't have to do all the work. But this is, I think, their biggest fundraiser of the year. Emily, you might know more about it than I do,
Nope.
actually. But this one's going to be on the day of the Kentucky Derby. And so it's Saturday, May 5th, which is coming up. And I think Steve was wanting to know if, one thing, if maybe we would be interested as a city in helping out by purchasing a table to attend it. I can't go, I'm going to be fishing that weekend, but I certainly will support it financially. So I wanted to ask you guys about that, the possibility of doing that. Maybe doing it as a sponsor to the event, if we could. He's got a little note in there you guys can read. And the other thing was just individually, if the city didn't want to, because I think we do it for other things.
We do buy tables at the Shawnee Mission Education Foundation breakfast and the
Right.
Chamber Gala and a variety of different events.
Right.
I think we typically have that at the restaurants too, right?
We had in the past, yes.
But yeah, I think it would be a good thing if we could support this and support them. You know, they do, like I said, some great things. The money that they're raising this is going to go towards, most of it goes towards their transportation. All 100% of their residents have jobs outside, and they have to have some kind of transportation to get them there and back. And it's, I think she said 10 to 15,000 trips a year, because you have 2 a day, getting there and getting back, and it has to be paid for. So obviously there's a big need, that's the point, and this thing can help out. And since they do some volunteer work for the city also, and I think it's a really cool thing that they're here in Mission. It's a great program. I think you guys met Charlie. He was president of the Ancient Order of Hibernians. He came to one of our meetings, and his daughter lives there. And so I've got a little bit of connection with him and one of the residents, which is really cool. But definitely wanted to see it if you guys would kick it around and support it in any way we can, and see what you think about it.
Well, and I will tell you that I've been talking with Sarah Mai, their executive director, about making and getting them more formally introduced as we've had some turnover on the council, and they will be hosting a happy hour on March 27th. We just landed on the date at 4 o'clock there, and they would invite the council and spouses and guests and staff and give us the opportunity to sort of come meet their participants and residents. So that was
When is it?
It's March 27th.
It's a Tuesday.
Tuesday evening.
Same as the state and county lunch.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be cool. Anyway, what do you guys think?
I'm definitely down.
I can go.
Yeah.
I don't
Oh,
know.
for the fifth? Or for the?
No, for the one on the 5th, yeah. For the ball.
There's a different fundraiser that we always goes on the same day.
Kentucky Derby Day.
Yeah.
That gets a big day or so.
It is Cinco de Mayo, so.
Yeah.
It's what?
Cinco de Mayo.
Oh, that's right. Oh.
5-5.
And I'm on
Does that mean you
vacation.
make your St. Jules with tequila that day?
Why am I going fishing on Cinco de Mayo?
Yeah, I don't know, what do we need to do? Can I suggest a proposal that we buy a table, or, and then ask for volunteers or people? I don't even know how many go to sit at a table.
Do you know what the table?
Yeah, they've got different ones, 20
$1,500.
seats.
$1,500 for 10 people. Or there's a $750
That's as a
for
sponsorship
5.
thing. I think that'd be cool. That way you know you're all gonna sit together too.
Yeah,
think if we were gonna do it, the table for 10 people is probably best.
Yeah. So can I propose that, and you guys support that, we need to bring that to the meeting?
I think what we'll just put it on as a new business item at the meeting. If
Okay.
that's, and do you want me to, do you want us to draft that as a recommendation for a table for 10?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's a good,
Okay.
That's a great sponsorship for this business
Yeah.
in our community.
and, you know, spread the word on this too, if you will. I've got some little flyers here, if you guys would take one of those, and give them to somebody who might be interested, and make a copy if you've got more than one person who's interested. I appreciate your help on that. And that's all I've got.
All right, thank you.
So just quickly, Coma Core training, Thursday, March 29th, 6 p.m. in the Johnson County Admin Building. Some have RSVP'd. If you are interested in attending, if you could please RSVP to mark that. We'll get that coordinated. It's very good training. And then also we have finalized some additional details for the retreat. Thanks to Nick, we're going to be able to use the 9th floor conference multi-purpose room at Fin Solutions, which some of you I know have seen, and it was really cloudy the day we were up there, so I'm hoping the sun will be shining on March 24th. But
To the penthouse.
That floor's a penthouse.
no. And we
If you're really, really nice that day, maybe I'll.
so we'll be starting at 9 a.m. We finalized the agenda with the facilitator this week, and so you'll be getting an agenda packet in advance of the retreat. But moving forward in the right direction, I'm looking forward to that.
Who's the facilitator?
Her name is Marla Flengy, and she's actually, she lives in Wichita, but she came very highly recommended. She's done a lot of facilitation and training work across the state.
She's in the leadership program down there.
She's been affiliated with Wichita State's program. Her husband he's retired now, but was a professor in the public administration program at Wichita State as well. So she's got a lot of really good experience. And in fact, it was Mike Press, the former Johnson County manager, who's worked with her on many occasions, who said he thought she would be a good fit for us. So.
As it relates to the upcoming retreat, one of the things that we brought up was the potential ability for the city to do like proactive planning with businesses and what we kind of like to see down that corridor. With several of them going out in the last couple of weeks and potentially more coming up, this might be a really good time to start putting something together, like a footprint of what we'd like to see business-wise. Right now, it seems more reactive in nature. I mean, if somebody comes in and gets a permit, decides they want to be there, you know, we can just...
Right.
So, that might be, especially just lately with the businesses going on.
Yeah, that Mexican place went out of business too.
Which
We
one?
got a bunch of it.
That little Mexican
Sandra's
grocery.
store.
Yeah.
Oh, the
Yeah.
grocer.
Yeah.
Well, when Taco Bell went out, I thought, what Taco Bell goes out? I mean,
That whole area is now really dark because that's where that service station is and Runza and.
Just a point of personal privilege, I just want to say thanks to all of you who sent me notes for good health. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Glad you're doing well.
we want to hear about your trip when you came back.
Yeah, unfortunately, I wish I could hear from her too.
All right, anyone have anything else, or?
Nick and Solly and I will be in DC Saturday through Wednesday. So if anybody needs us, we have cell phones.
Enjoy.
Yeah, very fun.
I just saw
Very
something that
wholesome
came out
stuff.
yesterday that one of the items for the administration now, they're considering letting people put mine tailings back into the water systems. I mean, we fought that for years because, I mean, there's such high lead content and it's really bad on your system. It's not really a partisan issue. It's a health issue. So just
That is, that's
so that'll come up
freaky.
in my committee meeting, I'm sure.
Sure will.
What is that, put one back in?
Mine waste, you know, we have all these
Yeah.
mining areas and the tailings go down in it and it's a variety of metals that go into it and it's really bad on your system.
great idea.
Yeah, exactly. Probably one of the 10 that left.
Same ones that want to kill elephants in Africa.
Yeah.